You're listening to the Roundup Podcast, a podcast on reaching the college campus, developing leaders, and sending out kingdom multipliers. This podcast is created by the Southern Baptists of Texas Convention and provided through cooperative program giving.
Well, howdy, friends, and welcome to the Roundup Podcast. I am your host, Mitch Tidwell, and I have my co-host with me, Kylie Badgley. Kylie, how are you?
I'm doing good. How are y'all?
Good. Good to see you. Good to have you. Hey, we're excited about the podcast today. We have Jason Lankford, who is the church planning strategist with the Southern Baptists of Texas Convention as of right now. This is being recorded. It is June 30th, but here in a couple of days, 5 days, right?
Something like that.
Things will be changing. So Jason's going to be planning a collegiate church plant up in the north. And so that's what we want to talk about today is just the road to planning, how he processed that with him, his family, and why he is going to plant specifically on or near a college campus. So Jason, we're super excited to have you today, man.
Well, thanks for having me, man. It's a joy to be with you guys.
Yeah. Well, hey, tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us about your family. How did you get to where you're at?
Yeah, so I'm a Texas boy, man, grew up here in the Dallas Metroplex. Allen is where we grew up. And, man, felt called to ministry for a fairly young age. Man, I remember after my freshman year of high school feeling called to ministry. But at the time, man, just kind of really going, okay, what does this look like? I thought maybe a pastor or a youth pastor were really the only two options I saw out there. Didn't want to do either one of those two. I've done both of them. Yeah. So grew up here. I did my undergraduate work at Ouachita Baptist University. From there, ended up overseas for a couple of years, which we'll talk about here in a little bit. Came back, did some graduate work before going and planting a church on our own in Alaska. And so loved our time there in Alaska. And then been back here, the Southern Baptist of Texas Convention for about 2 years. And so married to Caroline for 10 years. We got 3 boys, Boston, Trek, and Jude. And so it's like WrestleMania at our house right now, which we absolutely love. And so, yeah, that's kind of just a little background of me.
It's good, man.
Cool. Do you want to tell us a little bit more about your ministry experience?
Yeah. So, like I said, felt called to ministry at a fairly young age, but really didn't know what that was going to look like. And so I really went to study at Ouachita because I thought it was going to be easy. So I was a Bible major there at Ouachita and thought, man, I grew up in the church. And so this is going to be simple for me. And I remember sitting there in my freshman Bible survey class, which is a class that every single person that goes to Ouachita has to take. And I remember sitting there and just my jaw dropped and I'm going, I don't know anything about the Bible, and just was kind of blown away. And it was there that my love for theology and love for studying God's word really just started to take off, and really just for the first time in my life, I think probably started taking my faith. And again, grew up in the youth group, but really started taking my faith extremely seriously. I had the opportunity to travel overseas for a couple of weeks and do a travel through the footsteps of Paul. So went to some of the stops that Paul made on his missionary journeys, Thessalonica, Berea, went to Athens, was able to go to Rome. So going to these places and really just opened my eyes to the scripture in a way unlike any before. And after college, as a typical college student, when I have no clue what I want to do with my life. And again, knew I wanted to go into ministry, but at the same time, the Bible had kind of become like, I've been using it as a textbook. And so just wanted to take some time off for school and just kind of wanted to go, okay, God, what would you have for me? And about that time, got a call from a buddy who said, what about us going overseas? Like if we've talked about this. I had the opportunity to go on my first mission trip right after high school and went to Romania. And so I had kind of went, you know what, maybe overseas, but it was really nothing that I'd been thinking through in college. And he said, what about going overseas? And so I said, man, let me pray about this. And the grace of God just continued to open up doors and went overseas with the International Mission Board to Sudan and lived in Sudan for a couple of years. I describe Sudan as 2 of the hardest years of my life and 2 of the best years of my life, all wrapped up into one. And if you would have paid for my plane ticket home those first 4 to 5 months, I probably would have taken you up on it. But through the grace of God, man, just got to stay there, got to see God do some incredible things, met some guys that really have become good friends. And it's been many, many years since my time in Sudan, and still talk to some of those guys on a monthly basis. And so loved my time there. Came back and went, you know what, let's do some graduate work. And so did that at Southeastern Baptist Theological Seminary. Did some graduate work there. and then ended up pastoring a church or being on staff at a church in Arkansas. And this was before church planting was really talked a lot about. It was kind of starting conversations of church planting, but the church I worked at there in Arkansas had a partnership with the church in Alaska. And so when I came on staff, they said, man, who wants to lead the trip to Alaska and who doesn't want to go to Alaska? And so I said, man, I'll gladly lead this. And so ended up in Alaska and really fell in love with the place. And 3 years later, got an opportunity to go up there and plant a church. And my family and I, we moved up there. We had a 15-month-old and a 2-month-old at the time, had no clue what we were getting ourselves into. And man, we loved
parenting
Alaska.
Or church planting?
Probably a little bit of both. We were still in the baby. When you have a 15-month-old and a 2-month-old, life's just crazy.
Yeah.
You're delirious. So when someone says you want to plant a church, you think, I mean, we got 2 kids. We're delirious. Let's just do it.
Yeah. Let's
and
just stay
so,
in this,
yeah, I mean, who doesn't want to do that?
State of delirium.
Let's make life as difficult as possible. And so, man, we pulled up in Alaska, man, and the house we lived in, I remember pulling up. I left Arkansas on a Sunday. We still didn't have housing, like taken care of. I knew I was going to pull into Alaska on that Friday. My wife, Caroline, she called me on Thursday and said we had housing. Like that's the kind of journey we were on, just kind of flying by the seat of our pants. And I pulled up to this house and the house was leaning. And I'm thinking my wife and my kids aren't there yet. And I'm thinking, what have I just done to my family? I mean, we've moved from a great house in Arkansas and we're up here in Alaska, not knowing anyone for the most part. And mold was growing on the wall, the bathtub, you would just not want to. And I'm thinking, my wife is going to come into this place and she's going to go, what have you done to me? I mean, every place I lived in Africa was nicer than this place. And my wife, man, just a church planter wife, she walked in and was like, I can use the mold for decoration. Like we can make this work. And I'm thinking, I married the right girl.
Yeah.
And so I was in Alaska doing ministry there, planting the church for a little over 5 years. And then came back and have been here in the role of church planting strategist here at the Southern Baptist of Texas Convention for just about 2 years now. And so that's kind of a 30,000 foot view of ministry experience so far.
Man, I remember, I think when you first got here, we were in a Uber going to the airport I think we were getting an Uber from the airport back to the convention. And I don't know where the guy was from, but you just started speaking, I guess, is it Arabic?
Arabic,
to him?
Yeah. No, my Arabic is, I've lost a lot. I'm not fluent by any stretch of the imagination, but man, any chance and opportunity I get to speak Arabic. And oddly enough, I spoke more Arabic living in Alaska with people there from Somalia and from Sudan and Egypt and Northern Africa.
Really?
And loved it. And so, yeah, just had an amazing opportunity to use my Arabic, especially for some of the outreach events we would do. We would go into neighborhoods where, I mean, they were from all over the world. And so was able to use Arabic. And so, yeah, any chance I get, I like to show off to my friends who don't speak Arabic, and those who do speak Arabic realize that I don't know Arabic at all.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it's a blessing to
cool.
be able to speak a little bit.
So you go from Sudan to pastoring on staff at a church, Arkansas, Alaska, 5 years. You guys come back here. Knowing you for the last 2 years, planning and being a pastor is still a big itch for you. And obviously, you're even going to leave here in just a few days to go and plant a church. So why don't you tell us a little bit about what you're going to be doing next?
Yeah, so we'll be planning with a network called the SALT Network. And I was made aware of the SALT Network even when I was in Alaska. I remember hearing about the SALT Network and this group of people that were really planning in collegiate environments. And having a college in Alaska, so the University of Alaska at Anchorage has at least had 25,000 students, so pretty large campus, commuter school. But we had tried to engage the campus and really, to be honest, didn't have a ton of success doing so. And so coming back and serving in the role here, I kind of have this blessing that I like to talk about with interacting with planters here in Texas, where I go, and my favorite part of my job is get to hear about what God's doing in their midst. But what would start to happen is I would hear about what God was doing in their city, in their community, on their college campus, and go, man, I want to be doing that. Like that's where my heart lies. And so God just began to stir within us the last year or so, just a desire to be back on the front lines and to plant again. And so we had heard about the SALT Network, and when we left Alaska, Caroline, my wife, and I, we kind of said, I don't know if we'll ever plant again. Like we were probably a little exhausted, a little just emotionally drained, and went, I just don't know if we'll ever do it again. And it's like famous last words, right? I mean, the second you say that, it's God's going to stir within you. And so that's what he's really been doing, which we started asking ourselves, okay, so we kind of know what we're getting ourselves into this time. I mean, as best as you can be, right? So what are some of those non-negotiables? What are some of those things that we go, okay, if we plant again, like we want this to kind of be the final move. Like we want to be here for the rest of our lives. We want to get, I'm almost 40. Let's give the next 40 years to this. And so looking at the next generation was an area for us that we went, man, we desperately want to be about investing in the next generation. Like how we want to reach that's the crew that we want to reach. And so we looked at just different networks that were doing that and just fell in love with the SALT network and how they were engaging both the college campus and the community. Like kind of going at it from a two-prong approach of really trying to engage both. And so we looked at that and went, man, that seems to fit like our personality. It seems to fit like how we want to be about planting again. And so we just kind of started talking with them about the process and what it would look like. And so we can't wait to go and learn. For us, the next couple of years of being kind of a church plant resident there with the SALT network, it really is going to be a learning time for us and just seeing how they do ministry and engaging the campus. And that's a new area for us. Like we love college students and try to engage with college students as much as we can, but we've at the same time never really tried to reach a college campus. And so being able to learn and absorb as much information as humanly possible, man, we can't wait to do that. My wife is beyond excited to get to get back in the trenches and disciple and mentor and just get to do ministry again. And so, yeah, so we're really excited about that process.
That's great. And for those of you that may not be aware, SALT Company is basically the college ministry of Cornerstone Church in Ames, Iowa. You can look it up. Just Google search SALT Company or Cornerstone Church in Ames, Iowa, planting 20-something churches in 20s until 2020, 2021. COVID's probably had something to say about that.
16, 17 churches they planted right now, and they don't see any reason to stop anytime soon.
Yeah. Well, I love their vision of realizing if we're going to make an impact on the next generation, we got to reach the next generation and multiply and plant churches on that.
Well, think about how many massive decisions that you make between the ages of 18 and 24. Like, so I just started looking back on my own life and going, okay, there were some really big decisions that were made in my life between those ages. And, for me, God really strengthened my relationship with him and encouraged me. And there were people that surrounded me that God used really for this time in my life where a lot of decisions are being made where I go, man, I want to push all my chips on the table for the kingdom. Like that's what I want to do. Just give my life. I mean, I'm a kid from Allen, Texas, and I've had the opportunity to live in Africa. I've had the opportunity to live in Alaska. And these are things I couldn't dream up for myself if I wanted to when I was 18, 19 years old. And so just to push all your chips on the table and go, God, whatever you would have of my life, whatever it would be like. I mean, this has been a really fun journey. Like for me, like I just look at it and go, I've lived on the hottest place on the planet, the coldest place on the planet. Like, yeah, it's just been a really cool ride. And all that's just because we're just willing to say yes to the kingdom, whatever God asks of us. And so that gets us excited, those decisions. And we also know that that's when people are leaving the church. I mean, Dave Kinnaman and those guys, I mean, they've done Barna research. I mean, they've shown statistically that this is a time when people are leaving the church between the ages of 18 and 24. So what if we went in there and really tried to engage and meet them where they're at, have honest conversations about who Jesus is and the kingdom of God, and just try to minister in those environments. And so that's what gets us excited.
Beautiful.
Mm-hmm. So you told us this a while ago, like in February, right? Around then?
Yeah. It was end of February, 1st of March, right before the old coronavirus hit.
Yeah. So has that changed anything for you, or what has changed since then with all the
coronavirus has changed a lot for a lot of people. So in some respects, it hasn't changed. I mean, I was nervous at the time going, okay, is this going to change stuff on SALT Network's end? They're going to go, hey man, things are just a little different for us. We're still trying to evaluate. And I remember the conversation with them, and they're like, no, man, we're we're pressing ahead. This isn't a time for us to hit pause. We're moving full steam ahead. And so in some respects, it really hasn't changed our timeline or our time frame. Now, it has given us an opportunity to think and process a lot. Man, when you start working from home and you start just having time where you can't go and busy yourself, you really just start to process and think. But what I think that's done for us, for some people, it might make them nervous or might make them get a little antsy. I think for us, it has really solidified the call that, again, I don't know how many more days that God is going to give me, but I want to use them as best I possibly can to make much of his name. And so as we look at things now, and again, are there some uncertainties? Are there some unanswered questions? Absolutely. And we're answering questions, even with our planters here in Texas. I mean, I'm on the phone weekly, having conversations with them about what does this do for us as a plant? Man, we were meeting in a school and we don't have anywhere to meet now. What does this look like? So there's some unanswered questions. Absolutely. Are we still learning about what college campuses are going to do in the fall and going forward? Absolutely. But at the end of the day, we know that God has called us to plant, and even beyond that, just to make much of his name. Where we work, where we play, where we live, we want to be about that. And so, yeah, there's some things that have made us nervous, but I think in the midst of all this, we are more sure than ever before that God has called us to do this. What it's going to look like, that may be the unknown, but we're on.
Yeah, that's awesome. Cool.
Hey, so when you were kind of wrestling with all this, like you guys planting, was there a specific campus that you had in mind, or how did that just get started? You just call up Salt Network, say, "Hey, I want to plant. And I want to plant here." How does that work out?
Yeah. So my first conversation with Salt is, I'm a little bit older than some of their candidates.
Well, are you just sending an email to them with this, or are you just?
Well, so I have a relationship with Mark Vance, and so I've gone out to the Hitchhikers Conference for the last 2 years. And so have started interacting with them. Obviously, we've brought them down. Southern Baptist of Texas has utilized them to help train some of our college leaders here in Texas. And so had a little bit of a relationship, but not like we were best friends. I didn't have cell phone numbers. And so, I just sent an email. That's essentially what I did, and said, "Hey, is it worth having a conversation of us coming in and being a part of the residency and seeing if this is something that we can pursue?" And again, not really knowing how that was going to be received or how they were going to send it back, and got an email back, said, "Hey, let's at least have the conversation." And so talk with Troy Nesbitt and the guys there, and went, "Hey, let's bring you out. Let's have a interview process, and let's talk through and see if, man, you fit the mold of Salt Network, and you kind of have some of our DNA." And so, man, just spent some time. So to answer your question, to a certain extent, yeah, I just kind of sent an email and said, is this a conversation worth having? And man, those guys have been amazing, walking us through, and again, calming some of our nerves as things have popped up here and there. But yeah, that's kind of how it got going, is, man, through a simple email of going, is this a conversation worth having?
So are they saying, okay, hey, we want you to plant here, or are you choosing that? How does that?
Yeah. So I think so we leave middle of July and head up there to start our residency. And I think the next 6 months, next 8 months is going to be navigating that. So we know we're going to plant in the Midwest. We know that.
Because that's like their vision.
Yeah, they want to kind of be, there's something about proximity. Yeah. Again, we know that. Being in Alaska, we had a sending church. We had churches that were partnered with us, absolutely. But when you're 4,000, 5,000 miles away, it can be difficult to really know what's happening in the inner workings of the church that you plant. And so proximity helps. So yes, they want to plant kind of in the Midwest. There's a ton of colleges in the Midwest that have student population of 10,000 or more. And so to a certain extent, they're kind of going, hey, here's the college campuses that we know about in these certain states. Man, where is God leading you? How has he wired you? I think there's a lot of wisdom in knowing your strengths, knowing your weaknesses, knowing areas where you can succeed, knowing areas that might be of weakness to you. And so over the next 6 months, we're going to take some vision trips, and we're going to go out and heed the wisdom from the Salt Network and go, hey, these guys have planted, they've done this before in these areas. And so, man, soak up as much wisdom from them as we possibly can. But at the same time, be searching for ourselves, for our family, knowing how God has wired us, knowing our personalities. and going, okay, is this where God is kind of leading us? We know he's called us to plant. We know he's called us to plant kind of a collegiate church model like the SALT Network has been a part of. Now we're asking the question, okay, God, lead us to that specific city. Again, I got 40 years of ministry, hopefully by the grace of God, like this is going to be it for us. So lead us to that city. So take some vision trips and walk the streets, walk on the college campuses. I love getting to walk on college campuses, just walking through. And so we're going to take some time for the next 4 to 6 months and do just that and go to 4, 5, 6 different colleges. Specifically for us, and you guys know this about me, we love the cold. And so we're looking at some of those college campuses a little bit further north. So Minnesota, Wisconsin, Michigan are kind of the 3 states that we're looking at going, okay, God, there's 4 or 5 colleges that we've been looking at here, doing some research as best we can from Texas. But we want to take some vision trips to those specific campuses and just walk on the grass and walk on the sidewalks and just go, okay, God, what are you doing? I mean, what can we be a part of here? So that'll be the next 6 months or so. And then it'll start building the team. So again, going back to non-negotiables, we wanted to be a part of the next generation, reaching the next generation. The second thing that we kind of said as a family is we don't want to do this alone. We parachuted into Alaska. And again, we tried to build a team, but when you're talking about moving to Alaska, in theory, everybody goes, yeah, that sounds great. In reality, how am I going to get a job? And we got that. So we parachuted in just by family. And by the grace of God, like really survived and thrived in our time there. But we know that you don't plant churches alone. And so the fact that the SALT Network wants to send out teams to go and plant, to reach these college campuses, to reach these communities in which these college campuses are at, and that gets us incredibly excited. So that'll kind of be the next 6 months, next 12 months for us is building relationships there, figuring out, okay, God, where are you sending us? And then start building the team. So
what do your kids think of all of this, and how are you preparing your family?
Yeah, so I have a 7-year-old, a 6-year-old, and an almost 4-year-old. So all they have known until we moved back to Texas was snow. That all they've known is Alaska. They think Texas is way, way, way too hot, and I kind of agree with them. So the fact that we told them, hey, we're moving somewhere where there's going to be snow, their eyes lit up. And so again, they're at that age where as long as mom and dad are around, they're happy for the most part. I know that I have that for maybe about 5 more years with my 7-year-old before he's going to want me to get out as soon as possible. But we get a little bit more time with them where mommy and daddy are at, man, that they're happy. So they're really excited about going. We talk about church planting with them, and they even associate it with Alaska. So when we talk about church planting, they know, even though they were young, they still know that we were planting a church in Alaska. And so for them, all those incredible memories that they had of people that they met in Alaska, friends that they had, being a part of the church in the middle school, all of that, those really good memories that they have are starting to come back up, and they're going, oh, I'm getting excited about that. So they're looking forward to it. They're ready to get back to some snow. This summer heat that we have here in Texas, that they just about melt. And so if they're in water, they're happy. But if they're not in water, swimming or whatnot, they're just going, this is too hot, Daddy. And I'm like, I know, bud, I'm sorry. It really is. It's too hot in this state. So yeah, they're excited. My wife's incredibly excited. She's one who has her master's in theological studies, and she loves to be in the trenches of ministry. Like that, God has called her to do that from a very young age as well. And so for our time here, I'm just going to be honest, man, it's just been a little bit difficult for her. When I would go out and interact with church planners, she's not there with me. And even beyond that, she doesn't necessarily have all the context of the people that I'm meeting with. And so she's really looking forward to getting back to being a pastor's wife and just serving and ministering. Again, for her, and I won't go into her story, but she dealt with especially in her late teens, even early 20s, dealt with some issues of depression and whatnot. And so when she gets to interact and minister to girls, especially that are in that age of 18 to 24, like her eyes just light up. She gets so excited. And then for me, just kind of stand back and watch her do that. And there's something just beautiful about getting to watch your wife like minister to another lady who may be going through the same thing that she was going through, and where she knows now that all that she went through wasn't for waste. And she's just spending time investing in that generation. So the family as a whole is really looking forward to the next couple of years being there in Ames. But then at the same time, we're looking forward to the next step as well of going out and planting wherever God leads us.
That's good,
So,
bro.
yeah.
Hey, Jason, what would you say to if there's a guy out there that's like maybe he's a college pastor or leader and he's thinking that maybe the Lord's calling him to plant a church? I don't know. What kind of advice would you? If a guy comes to you and just says, "Man, this is like something about hearing this is like kicking some things in gears for me. What do I do? What's next steps here?"
Yeah, I think there's a few steps that you can take. I think having conversations with people who have gone before you is extremely helpful, helping you process, because there's so many blind spots that we have. And that's the blessing of planning for a second time, going, okay, I know there's some blind spots, but I also know that.
What have been your biggest blind spots?
Okay, so you're transitioning on me.
Biggest blind spots. This is really good.
Biggest blind spots. One of the biggest blind spots for me.
Or maybe just to any early planter, we can frame it down.
For me, we could talk about that for hours. I think one of the biggest blind spots for me is that I really felt like everything fell and rose on me. And so I think my leadership capabilities have grown over the last couple of years, because I thought, man, if I don't do this, it's going to fail. It's going to fall apart. Put a lot of pressure on myself to make ends meet and to make the church work and whatnot. And so I look at that and go, man, that was just such a blind spot for me, because it essentially is telling God, man, you don't got this, I got this. And so I think for me, I look back and go, oh, man, if only investing in leaders, continuing to invest in leaders and invest more. And so I want to continue to do that, elevate other people. And so it gives some other people seats at the table. And that's one of the best things that we can do, especially for the younger generation, is give them a seat at the table. Hey, come and learn and absorb as much as you possibly can. And so wanting them to do that. I have a tendency to be a little bit of a workaholic. And so in planting a church, I was bivocational for the first year when we planted. And so I was working 30, 35 hours at my job and then also planning the church. And so I spent a lot of time away and probably sacrificed my family on the ministry of the altar of ministry there. And so would completely do things differently now and not sacrifice my family. And I think that's a tendency for a lot of planters, is we can use ministry as a platform, or use ministry as a way to say, I got to go do this, family. And we're sacrificing our first ministry to our wife and to our kids. So those are some blind spots that I think that we have, and would absolutely do it differently now.
Yeah. All right. So back to the first question, advice. So blind spots. And then what other advice would you give?
So I think conversations with people are extremely helpful. So, if you're in the state of Texas, call the church planting department here, Southern Baptist of Texas Convention, because there's some guys that work on our staff here that have years of church planting experience. And you don't know what you don't know, right? And so you have even though you have like this theoretic understanding of church planning, like call someone who's been in the trenches. And so, man, reach out to Southern Baptist Texas Convention. Man, if you're looking at potentially collegiate church planting, we have some guys that are in Texas, and obviously there's some networks outside of Texas that would love to help you just kind of walk that journey. And so again, I go back to it. Don't do it alone. Right. There's no reason to do this alone. There's no reason to make decisions without having some information, because there's a ton of information that's out there. So often we just don't ask because we don't know. We don't know that it's out there. And so, start asking those questions. Also, don't plant out of frustration.
Oh, yeah.
So, if you're frustrated with the current ministry assignment that you have, that is not a healthy place to plant. And so I'm going to encourage you, man, to take some time away and get healthy before you go out and you plant a church. And so, yeah, I think reaching out, having conversations, asking the right questions. And then again, sometimes you don't know the right questions. So letting people, just kind of ask questions of you. And so, yeah.
That's really good.
That's good. No, it's cool.
Well, Jason, thanks for jumping on today, man. Really appreciate it. I think this is helpful stuff, just as, someone out there that's thinking about planting or maybe in the middle of it. And so we're excited. So hopefully maybe a year from now, we'll get you back on again. And this is the first, well, it's not technically the first, but we're labeling this podcast The Road to Planting, as we all just discussed this prior to this to figure it out. So hopefully we'll talk to you now, and then maybe a year into your process. We'll call you back. We'd love to call you back and kind of hear how things are going. So
perfect.
Thanks for being on, bro.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Well, guys, thanks for listening. This is the Roundup Podcast. Please subscribe, like, review our podcast. We're on all major platforms, Apple, Spotify, all the above. So join in there. Also, we have a Facebook group called the Roundup Network. It is a group full of collegiate leaders from around the state of Texas, pastors, collegiate pastors, leaders within ministries. So jump in there. It's a great place to network with other leaders, ask questions, ideas, share, collaborate, all that stuff. So like us on social media at SBTC Collegiate on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.